Um, Thank you everybody for joining me, some of us, for the second session of the September series of what we're now calling Dojo. Um, I'm really excited to welcome Annie and Hugh into this container. I'm really excited to welcome, in my understanding, Sirius, Polaris, and I'd say like associated deities like Set and Anubis healed outside of time into this container for the protection of this container and uh, for the cultivating of the most cosmic timelines available from this in time and time, then the awareness of all of our bodies. I'm just going to say a little bit of a spiel about just like chant a little bit of light language to set this container for y'all, and then I really look forward to handing it over to you and not talking so much. Um, just as a reminder, if anybody's watching this container for the first time or attending for the first time, um, Dojo is basically a container that I'd say has been held for a very long time, formerly under the name Mazde Wushu, for public demonstrations of energy work, for collaborative refinement of practitioners, people who are receiving energy work, and for everybody who's attending and watching these containers. And for, I'll say, like, increasing the influence of these different modalities of offering energy work, and also the influence of some of the things that I feel like we'll talk about in this container. Thank you so much again for joining. Um, Please be as noisy in the chat as you'd like to be. I'll be like putting this in a 000 container, as well as the recording, since Hugh and Annie agreed to let it be added to the 000 container. And I look forward to the conversations which continue as they've sort of continued after the container with Sarah and I last week. I'll say before I start chanting that I only allow this for the most healed, most whole, and most healed timelines of each and every being in this container and in the collective beingness of the one I know as Tao, or the one, or Shekinah. And I'm bringing forward a light language transmission from Set, Anubis, Sekhmet, and Shekinah, healed from outside of time, on the topic of, I'm going to say, primordial electricity. I'll start now. Thank you for giving some time to this. Yarmas of dip air, so kadad the mont anister of dip samokanin eurokatit eras. For Padaprishta Patamad of Tipiturma Sekanin air of Sukanan Ami. Shukanami animals Kudirst Kudian Eftim Sultan Kadas Kadianas. Woman Irish to Manafti Borokanas Libnema Katataristo. Hakanam Nisi Korokadefti Mekuma City Peter Stuka. Fuchrosh the Pensi, but in the ears of Time Ami. Hakanami eras of Tipitrosh Nakasapin. Тихо, сокомат амсоте, тарати канемисете, канемете деноминареш, неподамафтет креш. Кукати демет нина сакани ати мусут камиена. Титера шоти в те покороба катин екана басито в те пекати. Кукурик de креш катин сехте би аромасате меништепте манокадена. Каканим евшту крома кадемен скотина ставте мене скотина мене. Типе нимото в слоте порошта канемисете мене маканем. Fipper mukoropakanima da kripshkadea petasamokatima sekatima insanimokanashtanam. Hanasa, Hanasa, Hanasa pukoromakadiskia. Hamosopotamosa di sharapasamanas. Sierra musomanina kadira kana suku. Hanasa titreshamokadasamanisa. Nishana Samukanam. Ham Satapurusha Takaramasita Takratikan Sutana Masati Nakam. Hapa Sapuru Makanisha Tapomasa. Samukunamasopukai. Ta, 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 ta. Yeah. Nasabukoro Masapotamashtikadayara Tupu Satimini Meftiana Sapatimashto. Hamasapokana Makadire Kemasotini Eftimi Rokana Satiana. Kukarap Samatukata Kanapsho. Kakatepitimeneftipista. Kukarap Samantim Suman. Sha, sha. Hmm. Some very interesting things coming through. I don't want to anchor the container in any way by saying anything about them, but I'm going to unpin myself. Really excited to hear what y'all talk about and the kinds of energies y'all move. And with that, I'll turn it over to Annie. Thank you so much again for joining us. And I'll mute.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Annie. For a lot of you, it's the first time you're actually seeing me as a human. So here we are. I'm really excited about this experience and opportunity. So first, I want to say thank you for trusting me with this container in general and for allowing me to be a part of this energetic space because it is very valuable to me and I am excited for the work that we're doing today in particular, because it is almost a universal mirror for me. And that is very, was unexpected and also very exciting to say the least. So I guess the best way to describe what my understanding of what we're doing is essentially doing what would be very private one-on-one work out loud. And in this particular session, we'll be covering what could be considered a sensitive subject to some. So just for those who are here, just to make sure that all parties who are here are interested in this type of conversation, it will involve topics of a more mature manner, for lack of a better word, to be more specifically relating to sexual experience. So if that is not something that you are feeling called to be a part of at this time, then I understand and I hope to see you around soon. But if you're okay with that, then here we go. Do you want to start, Hugh, with a little bit about the background of what we're discussing to give the container some context, or do you just want to jump into, because I know we've had conversations, so.
Sure. So yeah, I have notes here.
Me too.
So what sort of came up, so I guess the title in my mind is like sex, intimacy, betrayal, and shame. And when I say that out loud, I'm like, oh fuck, here we go. And Annie said something this morning when we were chatting about this in terms of like moving towards conscious sexual connection. And so that I like, we'll start with shame and betrayal and hopefully move towards conscious sexual connection here. This came up for me because I was listening to a song recently that got me turned on. And then there was like a bunch of pain and shame and stuff that came up. And I was like, oh, that takes the fun out of these things. And And so I think that sort of, because Annie and I were like, okay, what are we gonna talk about here? And like that got me going. And I was like, okay, so where is this pain and shame coming from? And there were sort of like three things that came up for me. So one was the end of the last relationship. It ended with her cheating on me with my closest friend and a cousin. And I sort of like, I don't want to say okay, but like I've worked through a lot of the stuff there. But what's remaining me is sort of this sense of self-betrayal, and that I'm almost positive that he was not the first. And there was all these sort of signs that would come up. She really liked to go out for dinner on her own, and would come home and be like, oh yeah, some dude gave me his number. And I'd be like, yeah, I mean, you're super hot. That seems like a natural thing, whatever. But my guts would be like, dude, what the fuck? And I've always been with other partners, be like, oh, I'm going for coffee with a buddy from high school or whatever. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. But I didn't have that feeling with this, and I totally ignored it. And betrayed myself, and I'm pretty sure I'm feeling very violated now. So there's like, yeah, I haven't sorted that out. Now to get into more sensitivity type stuff, near the end, when it came to sex, she'd be like, just straight up like, I'm going to treat you like a fuck toy. And I'd be like, okay, not sure that I'm like super comfortable with that, but whatever works for you. And then I'd feel super gross after. And it leaves me feeling like gross about sex. And there are other fucked up stuff, but that's like enough of an example to sort of like give those watching an idea of like where the discomfort's coming from. And then the third thing was, I like the female form a lot. And I know that there's healthy and unhealthy ways, respectful and not respectful ways of dealing with it. And even though she was an extremely sexual person, she'd be like, you're vile, you're disgusting, you're a monster, because of sort of this attraction. And it totally, like, now that I've got some distance and I've done some therapy on this, it's like, no, like heterosexual males are attracted to women. That's normal. We have to like deal with that in a way that like helps us function in society and is healthy, and like the energy exchange is healthy, but like that's reality. And like, I'm okay. But I'm like, I'm really not okay. And I'm still fucked up about it. Just like, I saw this like, am I a monster? Like, so those are the things. And Annie was like, well, it sounds like you don't feel safe around sex. And that's true. And there is, for, I guess, in terms of conditioning that would lead to this, and I have worked through this enough that I can say this one out loud. I was molested by an uncle when I was 8 years old. So that sort of creates this starting point for lack of safety around sex and intimate relationships. So that is the setup and the feelings and those are sort of the jump off point. And I'll hand it back to you, Annie.
Okay, so I already warned him that I have a million questions, because my typical operating style, just to give you, since no one here's really worked with me before, but my typical operating style is kind of like, it's kind of like I'm performing energetic brain surgery, would be the best way for me to put it. So I'm going to pick apart, no, not in a bad way, don't panic. I'm going to pick apart the things that I feel have the heaviest energy to me, to try to find their origin, to illuminate the darkest places for you so that you can find the healing that you deserve. So with that said, let's get started. The first parallel I have to discuss with you may be too fast or too deep too soon. So if it is, tell me to table it and we'll go to another part of the energy. But the first parallel I pull is your experience in childhood and the word monster, and the projection of the word monster being used on you versus the experience you had with a monster in your sexual history. So that's my first energetic tether, so to speak, that I feel we should explore a little bit further if you're comfortable. Not necessarily the experience you had itself, but the energy behind the word monster used toward you in a sexual capacity in relation to your experience previously. Do you have any feelings that come up when we start talking about that word monster? What does it mean to you? Where do you feel it in your body when you heard that, or when you hear those words, where are you feeling it in your body? Where's the residual reverberation? You know, what are the associations you're having if you take yourself into that word when it is targeted at you specifically?
I feel like jackhammers on my temples right now. Yeah, that's mostly where I feel it right now. And nausea, I guess, depending on where you're from. Yeah, mostly temples and just like all over my body.
I mean, it's an intense tether, so to speak.
So,
I mean,
sorry, there's these memories coming up of the uncle.
mhm.
I have this like super conflicted thing. This is sort of what's coming up. I don't know. Do you mind if I
No,
go
go for it. Whatever. This is your space. I'm just here to ask the questions.
He had an aneurysm that he survived. But in the recovery, he didn't really get any help and he became addicted to meth and he lives on the streets now. And it's this, and I actually remember him as this like, he's kind of scary. He's this massive dude. He's like 6'4" and an iron worker and probably and he's like pure muscle and a like massive guy in fucking Viking. Think of your stereotypical Viking. He looks like that, hair down to his shoulders. And like kind of like a really gentle guy and just totally tortured. And so I have this weird like I guess because of the drug addiction, like that part doesn't. I don't know why this is coming up because it doesn't have anything to do with my own potential monstrosity. Okay. Yeah, that's the end of that memory. I don't know where it's coming from. A lot of tension in the forehead.
Sorry, I got dropped for a second. So if you could just repeat what you said last, please.
Oh, what was the last thing you heard?
I heard you were exploring the drug addiction feelings and then it froze.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's fine. It doesn't really reflect my own potential monstrosity. So I'm like, I don't know where that came from or why it came up. But maybe it's like I don't see him as like, to me, this guy is just like, or was a hardworking guy who was being haunted by his demons and it's eating him alive. And so like the monster must be me.
Why do you feel so quick to excuse his behavior, but not your own?
Hmm. Oh, that goes earlier. That I would say is learned behavior from either coping with my parents or like learn directly from them, in the sense that especially my mother, it's like was like superb. Like part of it's like playing the victim, I think. And part of it is just like it's like a fucked up way of taking responsibility for the things that happen in your life.
So I feel called to explore mom a little bit more, because in my like writing earlier, that was one of the words I wrote down was mom. So interesting that we found ourselves here. In what ways do you feel like your mother is paralleled in the relationship with the ex, if any?
Totally incapable of empathy. And they both had sort of a similar way of like, I'm going to say downloading their pain, but really like not just the words used, but like the rhythm of their language, in terms of like, you're a piece of shit. Like, why do you think you're so smart? You know, what's wrong with you? Just these like, so that kind of, very used to that sort of thing. And my, like, yeah, my defense mechanism has always been to be like, whatever, like, and then to like try and make it better, like not in the moment. In the moment I go like fucking disassociate and like I'm out of here, like, or like my, obviously my physical body's there, but like I just leave town. And but then like as soon as it's sort of like I'm not being yelled at anymore, or whatever tone that's taking, I'll come back in and be like, how can I make your life better so that you don't do that to me again? And so I think the pattern was similar in that sense. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I hear a lot of energetic darts when you're talking about the way that people are throwing their energy at you, as opposed to being in a communal energy. It seems as if you have had to protect your own, and because of the just attack, for lack of a better word, from the darts of the others around you. And it doesn't surprise me that you found that pattern repeated in this woman who truly abused you, for lack of a better word. Because at the time, your only capacity to know love at first is through the love of your mother. That is your first unconditional love, should be in a perfect world, from the mother. So if the mother, I don't know how I always end up talking about mother wounds, but here we are. If the mother's love creates a chaotic environment for you, it's no wonder that you will feel comfortable in chaos in a relationship with another. So now that we've lived through our mother's love, now we've recreated a romantic love with another woman similar to our mother's love. And that did not go as planned, to say the least. And now we're trying to create what we know to be, we don't want to go back to this love. We know we need a different experience this time, but we have no example of what that is. You know, we haven't lived that. So we don't have a blueprint. You don't have the inner workings of like, okay, this is how I move forward and this is good and this is not. So now you have decided, okay, I have to learn to trust myself, which you've already said, well, how can I? Because I let this person do all of these things to me and I love them regardless. And I spent my time attempting to make their life easier at just so that they could give me a breadcrumb of connection. And that didn't go well. So how do you move forward in starting that process of developing something with someone else while learning to trust what is truly intuition, because you said you had the gut feelings, versus what is fear, versus what is dissociation in the moment for survival. And that's where we're going to really like dive in. So the question is, for me, I would start with, how do I learn to trust myself? Where do I start there? Because you have said that you've worked through a lot of these things to an extent. So I don't really want to make you rework through all of it. If you've done a good amount of that work, it's kind of like, what good is that to you if you've already done it? So unless there's something you would like to discuss from then that you feel like you still need to work through, I'm happy to do that. Just let me know. But I think at this point, let's start working through, how do we trust what is intuition versus what is fear? And I think the best way to start doing that is by stating, what are we afraid of?
Yeah, no, this makes a lot of sense, because a lot of it is still around the sense of self-betrayal and trust. And specifically within like I've been practicing a lot sort of on my own, trusting my intuition with all kinds of things, like the dream thing I was talking about in the room the other day, where it's like, yeah, I'm just gonna do this dream and see what happens. But when it comes to, specifically when it comes to like relationships with women, it's like there's like zero trust there. So I think the fear is, and I have been thinking about this, and I'm like, what? There's just like so much, because of course, like this last was not the first. Like pretty much every relationship, I mean, she was on another level, but yeah, I've repeated this pattern a few more times than I'm willing to admit. And it's like there's something about just the like extreme violation almost, and not trusting myself to be like I'm going to be able to say no next time someone pushes those boundaries, because they're sneaky about it, because they like love bomb you first and then the bullshit starts. And so you're like, oh, give me some of that. This is the thing, it's like I like that attention. I want that love. My mom was incapable of empathy, so it's like I'm sure like I've been doing a lot of work. We were talking about this last week, I guess, in Hoda's what is it called? Frequency tune-up. About this sort of like I've been doing a lot with sort of like being my own mother. But I don't trust that I'm gonna do that when it's like, oh, here's a woman who seems like she wants to give me these things that I need and want. And then later it's like I'm getting stabbed in the back. So I don't trust that I'm gonna not fall for that again, and B, if I do, like get out when things start getting ugly.
So I feel called to say this, and I hope it lands well. You did not have the mother you deserve to have. And if you were to have had a mother that you deserved to have, what do you feel like she would have, how do you feel she would have loved you? What would love have looked like from the mother you deserved?
Okay, I'll give you a recent example actually. So I because I subsequently had my life threatened by my cousin, when I sort of, I wouldn't call it a confrontation. I was just like, hey man, what's your side of the story? What happened here? And he lost it. And I don't tell my mother anything about what's going on in my personal life, but I felt like I needed to because this was family and it was her brother's son. And I was like, this could get really weird. Like my psychoanalyst was like, for the next 2 weeks, in the next 2 weeks, he's either going to cool down or he's going to end up in the psych ward. But you should probably be alerting people just in case. So I was talking to my mother about this, and her initial, she cackled. It was this like, ha, well, you fucked that one up, didn't you? And so I would have liked a mother who was like, oh, that must fucking hurt a lot. You know, like that would be my preferred response. Like, that's pretty shitty. And she did not do that. Didn't do that when I had really severe Crohn's disease as a teenager and spent a lot of time in a hospital through my teens and 20s. And same thing. I would just be like, well, you look like shit this morning. And so there's just this like, she's a fucking hard woman, man. She's tough. Yeah, so I would have liked some like, hey, at least like acknowledge that I'm in pain. I think that's what that would be the bare minimum.
What would be the maximum in a perfect world?
For me, the sort of like embodiment of the maximum is like Our Lady of Guadalupe. That's sort of, I don't really know how to articulate that, but that like, hey, I'm there for you, no matter what you do.
When you think about that type of love, the consistent type of love that you're alluding to, where do you feel that in your body? If you were to try to feel it, where do you feel it?
Oh, it's in my heart. And it's like, okay, and this is where the betrayal comes in, because I have a fucking strong heart now. But it's still this like, okay, I'm doing this thing for myself, and I still, whenever I'm like freaking out now, I have an exercise for sort of like going into my heart. But I still am like, oh, a woman's gonna come along and I'm gonna fall for some bullshit and it's gonna result in so much pain. So it's like I don't trust that strength to be there. Yeah.
Well, when we experience trauma, part of our coping mechanism is to re-traumatize ourselves in preparation to experience the trauma again so that it won't hurt as much the next time. And I think that, a lot of people do that in a lot of different scenarios, because it's like it allegedly makes you feel less afraid in the moment, but all you've done is you've re-traumatized yourself with a trauma that hasn't occurred based off of a trauma that's already occurred, and then enmeshed yourself in those feelings twice what they would have been had we not preemptively traumatized ourselves moving forward. It's not funny, but moving forward. It sounds like, oh my gosh, as you're saying this, it sounds like, oh, what am I doing? Why would I ever do that? But we all do it. That's just part of the human experience because we are trying to survive, right? And our survival is based around if we are able to learn from previous scenarios. And so when you set yourself up for a history of what you're perceiving as failed learnings, because you said this is a pattern for you, the only thing you start to believe in is that you are failing and you will continue to fail. When in reality, you're not failing or picking, you are kind of picking the wrong people, but it's not about that as much as it is about shifting the perspective to what am I learning from this? What have I gained to learn moving forward that I'm taking with me? What do I see in these partners and that I can line up from my mom and the way she loved me and all of these partners? What are the common denominators? What are the red flags in these people that we can say, this is a hard boundary for me. If I see this, done. Or by done, I mean either you walk away or you have a verbal conversation where you set a boundary with this person and then you trust yourself to hold it. So let's explore that a little more. If you don't feel like it's something you want to share out loud, that's fine. You can keep that in your own processing bank, but are there parallels that are obvious that jump out to you at first that you can say, this is 100% something I will not tolerate in my next relationship?
Oh my God. I've got a list, actually. That's funny. I was wondering why this book was here. This might be fun. I don't know how much we want to go through all this. Fuck, there's like 3 pages here. Okay. These are what, I don't know, this may be helpful to people. And if this is like, recorded, maybe. So one is like, do you feel anxious when they text? That's like, fucking shut her down. Like, that is no good. Do I feel insecure about taking time to respond? Have I been sacrificing my present attention on my kids or on my work to appease this person? Do I feel drained after interacting with them? There's this William S. Burroughs poem that I like to quote. And he says, if you ever feel like you've lost a quart of plasma after being in someone's presence, avoid that presence. Are they constantly questioning my version of events? Black and white thinking, lack of empathy, because the thing is, the lack of empathy shows up in their interactions with other people first. They'll be like telling stories about others and you'll be like, it's kind of a fucked up way of responding to that. And then you're like, yeah, whatever. It seems like they love me. I'll just carry on with my day. Don't do that. There's all the emphasis on my efforts. Like they're always pointing the finger at you, like you're the one who needs to carry the water here. Fuck that. Sorry, this gets me really worked up. And do they denigrate your, when you do make an effort, do they denigrate the effort? Because it's like, yeah, it's like, hey, I'm putting in the work, and they're like, well, it's not good enough. It is good enough. Fuck you. How about you start working? They never let go of things. So it's like they're just like one fuck up from 4 months ago. I mean, if you're 4 months into this, you're in deep trouble, but you know, it's like weird underhanded negativity about people, even though they're like present themselves as saviors. And do they blame the challenges in the relationship on me? Projection. And like, I know projection's kind of one of those words around here, but like my radar for like, is that a me thing, or is that you trying to make me like, yeah. If you ever catch them smearing you to other people, get the fuck out of there. Like right fucking now. Put up with a lot of that shit. Isolation from friends and family. That's extreme, like air sirens run for the bunker and never turn back. Do they push you away or get mad when you're like go out to meet other people? They'll never say sorry when you're genuinely hurt by something they've said. And they'll make excuses for it and say that it was deserved. That's fucking terrible. That hurts a lot. Bullying behavior, that's a no good. Let me guess, the password was either God or sex God. That's funny. I don't know. The list continues. Shall I continue here?
I feel like you have a good idea of what you're not willing to tolerate, which is that's the first step, right? So we've completed that step. That's great. We're well on our way at this point. There are two things that really came forward for me when you were talking mostly about the things that you've experienced and what you're not willing to put up with moving forward. The first, we've kind of talked a little bit about this privately, but the first being the idea of what a lot of more new age spiritualists refer to as like an energy vampire, someone who is literally sucking you dry of anything that you could possibly give them, emotional, psychological, energetic, and in this case I would argue to say sexually as well. I wonder, one, your thoughts on that, and two, do you feel that there's still a cord between you and this person where they are siphoning your energy? And also, was the only value that you felt you had in the relationship with them sexual in nature?
Ooh.
Meaning, was that the only place you were seen as valuable to them from your perspective? That was a lot, sorry.
Yeah, okay. I might have to get you to repeat I'm going to answer the second question, then I'll get you to repeat the first one. Perfect. No. I mean, sex was a big part of it, but I was also a garbage can for her bad days and her anger and the other all nasty feelings. And 3, money, which is embarrassing, almost as embarrassing as the sex thing, but I was also a source of money. Well, that gives me a headache. Okay, what was the first question?
The first question is in relation to like energy vampire type, for lack of a better phrase, like someone who is siphoning your energy do you feel it's still current? What are your thoughts around the experience while you were, under their attention?
I have done a lot of ritual work, for lack of a better word, to all kinds of spells and all kinds of bullshit in order to cut those cords. There are, I mean, this is one of the things we haven't talked about yet. Like, part of the reason I got pulled in on this was because I actually suspect there was some spell work involved, but like, we got tied together in a way at the beginning in which I could feel what she was feeling in her body, to the point where, like, if she'd go for a run, my legs felt like jelly. Okay, she worked with the dying, and occasionally in sort of like emotionally intense situations, I'd be able to see through her eyes and stuff. So we're extremely tied together. There is lingering, like, we always woke up at exactly the same time every day, and I still think that occurs. I still know when she's having a rage fit. I can feel it. I will be driving down the road and I will start crying, and I'll be like, this is not mine. And then I'm like, I'll go in, I'll check in, and I'll be like, oh, that's her shit. So yes. Oh, I've gone hardcore no contact. Like, she's blocked on like, I've known nothing. So the only way I can check in is sort of like with divination tools. So yes, I have done a lot of work to break cords. I am still corded, and I've asked, and they're like, oh, this may last for the rest of this lifetime. But it's like tapering down, and it
Do you feel
sits
like it's one-sided? Like, she's latched to you versus you latching to her?
I don't know. I know she told me straight up the last time we spoke on the phone that the shamans she's been working with did a lot to cut things off. So I don't know.
Okay. Have you tried any sort of method of release that you felt was substantial, or that you would be willing to try again?
Well, a massive one actually was the dream thing, like where I took the crystals into that lake. That made a huge difference. I used like hex breaking candles, which worked. Well, yeah, the short answer is yes. Like, I keep chipping away at it. It is definitely like a primary goal in my life, is to like entirely sever this. Yeah. Oh, I think I might have lost you there.
Yeah, I feel like Annie's frozen for me right now too. You can hear me though, right?
Yeah, totally.
Okay. Okay, I think she's back.
So sorry. I don't know why my internet doesn't like me today. And I live with someone who's very good at fixing the internet, who is also listening to this at this moment, who maybe could come and help with that. Okay, so you were saying,
yeah, that's been happening today.
so last I heard you were talking about taking the crystals into the lake.
Oh yeah, okay. So yeah, there's a bunch of like, I've done a lot of candle stuff. I've I basically have a daily, twice a day ritual where I like chip away at this from an energetic perspective, and it's working, but it's like a slow. It's a slow process. I don't understand why, but it's a slow process, and it's kind of interesting that Nobu asked about it, and he says you don't get to answer that question. So, yeah, there's some. And it's interesting because there's a healer that I've been working with regularly for the past 8 months or so or whatever. And she's simply not able to go there. It's like the one aspect of my, she's like, I can't see. It's totally blocked off. So I don't understand what's going on there.
So it's interesting that it's been shielded in darkness for everyone, and maybe including you to an extent, as far as not being able to fully release that cord specifically. So if we shift from the idea of like cutting the cord to more of guarding the cord and blocking the cord, almost to me, it feels like I want to use the metaphor of like an electrical current. If you keep the wire there, how can you manipulate the wire so the current doesn't reach you? If you were to visualize that, what actions do you think would be best for that type of a scenario?
I'm like seeing putting resistors in the circuit, so it just like gets plugged up. Like I think from a physical perspective, I've done like not only, unfortunately, my mother's side, my extended family on the other side is also involved now in a weird kind of way. And so like not only have I blocked her, but I've blocked them as well. And so that I have like no sort of like physical world interaction with these people whatsoever. And anytime like if my mother brings something up, I'll just be like, no, you stop right now. I don't, this is not a part of my life. So it becomes like if thoughts enter my mind, I redirect my attention to something else. Like I've had 3 dreams now with this woman who kind of has like an Our Lady of Guadalupe sort of vibe. And like I will like if something comes in related to the ex, I'll like replace it with that energy. Like I'm just like redirect my attention to that. The From a feeling perspective though, I think I was talking to Nobu about this a little bit, is like when it's I know that there's at least 3 or 4 people who are still involved in, or they're so I still don't really understand how all this works, but like some parts of their larger selves are still involved in like energetic attacks. And like when I know they're incoming and I get warning, I will like lob the grenade back at them. This does like a fuck off, stop doing that. They don't stop though. Yeah, that's what I'm trying.
Just to validate you a little bit, not that you need validation, but in case that's something you've been struggling with, validating your more spiritual messages and things like that. You saw me writing in the beginning. I haven't done a lot of writing since, but if you can tell, this is you. And these are your 3 energetic tethers. So I would validate to you that there are 3 of some things that are actively trying to interact with you that come in a set.
Yeah, I know who they are. Yeah.
So that, is important. One of them would be a more dominant figure, and the other two would be like a subsidiary. I don't even know what that word means, but that's where that comes to mind. Like I have like a figurehead, a mastermind, and then two minions that are involved as far as that's concerned. And I think that I will say this, regardless of what ends up happening in that spiritual realm, I feel you still have the capacity to heal what you're wanting to heal. And in some ways, those two things are separate journeys. I think that they do interact with each other, but I don't think that they have a causal relationship, if that makes sense. Like, I think you can still move forward in healing these parts of yourself that you're looking to heal, and also have these characters still be at play and learning to manage them at the same time. I don't think, and I don't know if this is how you were viewing it, but I don't think that this is a black and white, this has to be handled before we can move forward type of a scenario. I think it's we're moving forward together in progression, and they may parallel, but I don't think that they are necessarily causal.
Okay, that's huge, actually. No, I had not thought about that, and that it makes me very happy to hear that. Yeah, because I think I was like, oh, I need to get these people to fuck off forever before I can carry on in my life.
I think that's what they want you to think, because that's what draws you in. That's the alluring part of being in their web, is if you're giving them your attention, they've caught you. So when you're so focused on this, you're in the web of the spider. Here we are again, talking about spiders. You're in the web of the spider, right? And they've got you, and you're focused on being in that web. And when you're able to focus on something else, another exploration, and take flight out of that area to something better, a higher ground, the spider will not get you. They can't reach you. They can only web so far, and eventually you just fly out of their path.
Boy, I like that.
And I think that let's start embracing that type of a perspective on this noise is going to be there, and there is importance in shielding ourselves from it and actively working on separation and really learning that we're strong enough to do that, because sometimes we don't. Sometimes it's really easy to go backwards. It feels good. We're used to that. We know that energy. We live in that energy. It is a safe, non-safe energy, right? It's safe because we know what to expect. It's not safe because it hurts you. And now we're trying to shift to a safe, non-safe energy, and that it's safe because it's actually safe, but it feels non-safe because it's actually safe, and you don't know how that feels.
Okay, that's juicy. So how does one, because we sort of started all this off, you were talking about knowing sort of like, now I'm paraphrasing here, but sort of like knowing what a healthy relationship looks like is like a big challenge. So it's like, okay, I can definitively say like, I don't want to do that shit anymore. It's terrible. It hurts so bad. But it's also like, where am I going? I don't know. I don't know what that feels like. It's like, I don't know. I imagine it being like, okay, I grew up in a tropical country. I've never seen snow before. And I'm flying into Toronto in January. And it's like, you can be like, okay, I've seen pictures of snow. I've seen pictures of people who seem happily married or whatever, or in relationships where they're not abusive to each other, or heard stories about people who have like fulfilling sort of conscious sex, but I'm like, I don't know, that's like snow to someone who grew up in the tropics,
So you're attempting to
I'm not even sure what plane to get on,
Yeah. You're trying to go to a destination that you've only seen a picture of, but you've never stood on the ground there.
Yeah.
And those two things are very different. So you're going from the 2D into the 3D, right? Or in this case, more the 4D, if we're adding in like a spiritual component to it. And I think that this is how I conceptualize the idea of what is a relationship that is good enough for what you need. Is it's not so much a itemized list of these are the things that are a good relationship, because everyone has different relationship standards, right? That's why it's so important that we talk about your particular boundaries, because what's acceptable for you may not be acceptable for me, and what's acceptable to me may not be acceptable to you in a safe relationship. So we're looking at, what do I need to feel safe and secure in my partner, with my partner? What am I offering to make my partner feel safe and secure? And what is the energy around us that enables us to have that security and attachment that is regulated, as opposed to dysregulated in the ways that you've described, walking on eggshells, having feelings of like fight or flight, trying to appease a one party in this two-party system, which actually sounds more like there's 4 or 5 parties involved. But in this moving forward scenario, we have to mesh together. What is it we need from like a human standpoint? What's my human list? Okay, I need them to be loyal, trustworthy, do what they're going to say what they're going to do, and do what they're going to say, and their word means something. And then what do I need from a spiritual perspective? How are they going to honor my growth? How am I going to honor their growth? And what does the communication style look like between the two of us for that? And then also, I don't really know that I have a label for the sexual one, but I want, in a way, it seems like you have a human form and your spiritual form. And for some reason, I'm seeing sexual consciousness as the embodiment that harbors both of them. Like there are these two, I'm very metaphorical in case you haven't realized. I see these two ships, and then the harbor in which they're docking is the sexual consciousness. So in order for that to all align to me, and it may be different for you, you have to align on the human level and on the spiritual level. And when those two things have aligned, you can experience this harbor of conscious sexual connection.
Woo!
I found this on the web.
Oh, Siri has an opinion, so we'll just.
Whoa. Just reading the chat there.
I haven't really read it, so I apologize for. I've been in
Yeah.
the zone.
Knocked it out of the park, like. Hmm. So there's a part that's doing this like yabba 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 and whatever, but there's also this like. Okay, yeah, no, it's fine.
I mean, feel free to but
like, it's like there's like this doubt thing. It's like, does that actually exist? Is that a real thing? Have people actually ever docked in this harbor? Because you're actually like, you're talking about almost like there's 4 cruise ships involved actually, because like there's like 2 people's physical needs and their spiritual needs that are like aligning here. And I think the like yeah buts are like, whoa, what's the probability of that actually occurring? And I think, I don't know, this is like requires faith, I guess.
I think I feel a bit more that you are 2 people on the same boat. and not two human boats trying to sail the same path, but instead you are two humans on a boat of humanity trying to be human together. And that is your boat. So if that boat is floating and you're floating your spiritual boat, if it's floating your boat, then you have the potential for everything to be aligned, as opposed to the idea. I think you're putting distance, even in your discussion of metaphors, between you and this other person, creating that protective space. Like, oh, that's their boat, this is my boat, and maybe our boats can, like, whatever. Instead of saying, I'm allowing them onto my boat and I will go onto their boat. And if it goes down, we will both get in the life raft together.
Oh shit. I might start crying my ass off here.
Oh my God, yes, please cry. It's so good.
Crying live on TV. No, that okay, let's okay, sorry, there's so much going off my body right now. I think that thing about the life raft and like there's almost like a neediness to it on my part. It's like, man, be sweet to have someone like when shit gets hard, that it's like shows up for you. Yeah, like this is so basic and everyday, but I've been moving the last week and I've been doing it like entirely on my own. And I'm like, oh, this sucks. Like, wish I had an extra pair of hands here. And there's a big thing of that, like, and kind of like a fuck you to the world, I think, because I feel like I have shown up for folks when they needed it. And yeah. So yeah, that's a huge thing. And I don't like this goes back to your point about like I guess like re-traumatizing myself in preparation for the next trauma is like I don't believe in the like that someone would actually show up.
What would it look like if you suspended your disbelief?
Hmm. I don't even know how to do that. What would it look like? Fuck. I feel like I have to go into like visualization slash affirmations territory here. Like speak it into being because I do not have. Oof, sorry, memory's coming up. That's heavy. It's pretty deeply ingrained. I after my third surgery and these bowel resections. For my third surgery, I was like totally on my own, and I would like when I was sent home, I literally had to like crawl on my hands and knees to the bathroom, and I like It's really like, fuck, I wish someone was here to help me out. So it's like, sweet to have someone there when that shit's going down. I guess that's what it looks like. I mean, ideally, I would not find myself in that circumstance again. But...
You are worthy of that kind of connection.
Sorry, can you say that again?
I said, you are worthy of that kind of connection.
Yeah, I can't even hear it.
I think that's where you have to start, is believing that you're worthy of it. And not so much that it doesn't exist. Because I mean, aliens are real, and we didn't think those existed like 10 years ago. So, you know, but I think to decide that we are worthy of more than we have been given is the most crucial part. If you can't find your own worth moving forward, you will not find someone who views you as worthy and valuable.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to like shut off the parts of my brain that are protesting right now.
It's okay if they protest. We can talk back.
No, I want them to shut the fuck up.
I mean, from my standpoint, and I don't know what everyone else's belief is, but from my standpoint, everyone is worthy of a basic right of compassion, regardless of their circumstance. Everyone is worthy of being heard, even if what they're saying isn't something that aligns with me personally. Their voice is worthy of being heard, at least at first. Everyone is worthy of support when they're going through something difficult. I mean, to parallel it back to your family member who you've given much compassion to for his actions that negatively impacted you based on his life circumstance. He is worthy in your eyes of that compassion. Mm-hmm. Why are you not worthy of that in your eyes?
I am worthy of that. But
yeah.
I think, okay, the interesting thing here is like, I'm noticing that there's layers. So I've actually fairly, just in the last couple months, worked on that one, where you just pointed like that level of, in terms of, for whatever reason in my mind, I differentiate between like having patience with myself for my own fuck ups. I'm not an angel. And so it's like, I'm in a place now where I like get 100%, I am worthy of that. The sort of like grace I give to other people in their fuck ups. I'm worthy of that grace. But for some reason, it feels different in terms of like, you say, I'm worthy to have someone be like, oh, you know, you're going through a painful experience. Someone shows up for you. You like physically need help. You're worthy of having someone show up. Those are like different things to me for some reason. In my mind, like the I don't understand why. I'm just sort of trying to figure this out.
You're fine. Can you go back to the first time you separated the two of those concepts?
It was just now, I think. I don't, well, like, yeah, I mean, certainly the first time I've spoken it out loud.
Can you think of a time that you created that in an experience in your life that you would relate it to? Like, where's the foundation for that separation coming from?
So I've always had the, like, when I was in elementary school, they would always, like, the kids who had like fetal alcohol syndrome and stuff, they would always put me in groups with them because it would be like, they knew it would be like, oh, Hugh doesn't bully those kids, so he gets to be in that group. And so like that's always been a part of me. And I don't think like that, almost feels like it was something I came into this world with. Mm. And then there's sort of like, I feel like, I don't know if this is from my parents or grandparents, but there's definitely this belief that like nobody deserves anything. And so it's like, every fucking thing is earned. There's nothing in life, at least in the physical realm, where you don't, where it is not an exchange. Um, and it is like from the like authority figures or whatever language you want to use, it's just sort of like, I'm not going to show up for you and you shouldn't, and I'm doing this as, in fact, it would like be explained to me like this is an act of love, because when you go out into that world, this is the way it works, and like you fucking earn everything, nothing is deserved. It's a very like Lutheran Calvinist kind of idea, really, of like there, you know, yeah, I would say that that's where that comes from.
What was the currency for love? How do you earn love? What's the trade-off? What do you have to give?
Hard work.
In service to the person?
Yeah, on my mother's side of the family. And then it's just like, my dad's side of my family, it's like hard work as its own reward kind of shit. Like, I don't know that they actually have a concept of love on that side of the family. Yeah.
How are you breaking that standard for your family that you're creating with your child?
Mm. This is hard because this is sort of like, this is an ongoing learning experience. So when we lived in the bush, it was very much about like letting him be free in the woods, and like when he was like 2 years old, he'd take off with the dog and just like do his thing, you know. And so part of my initial thing was like extreme freedom, and like now that I have returned to civilization, like that doesn't work for him or anyone else. And um This is so hard. I guess the process, like, because of what's happened, he's got he likes to break shit. He's got a lot of anger, and it's like trying to make space for that, I guess, and like, okay, that's an expression of your being right now, and like that's okay, and I'm not gonna whoop your ass. And that's like very practically, I guess, what I'm trying to do.
I think what I'm touching on here is more of, we talked a little bit about your mother's love, and we're shifting into what your father's love was versus the father's love you're giving to your child.
Oh yeah, and that's the other hard thing about this is like I'm playing mom and dad and trying to do both, and that's like I constantly find myself like waffling back and forth between like, here are the standards, here are the like, here's the, we live in a social reality and you don't get to run buck naked in the streets like you did in the bush with your dog. And just like, you need to understand that there are these like limitations that are imposed on us, and like, here's how we behave and interact with people in a way that like doesn't make them freak out, because that's not good for anyone. And then also like, I guess being nurturing and holding this kid when he's hurting, and yeah, showing up from the way that my mom had. And it's like really not an easy thing, like task switching between those two all the time. Yeah. And I guess I'm like trying to do that for myself at the same time.
Yeah, that's where I was going to lead you to, but it seems like you've arrived there on your own. The way in which first, I commend you, because the work you're doing for your child is very difficult and necessary, but doesn't make it any easier, right? And it is a lot sometimes to have to parent a child in a way that you were not parented in. In fact, at least from my experience, I was parented in a much different way than the way I'm parenting my child. And to not have an example of what to look to can be very challenging, because you don't ever feel settled in the choices you're making. And I think sometimes when we're in this chaos, so, my children are 6.5 and 2. And I have one child who is very energetic, physically, very loud, very playful, very fun, wonderful, amazing, but also overstimulating and has big feelings. And they're very loud, big feelings. And I was raised in a home where I was not allowed to have loud, big feelings. So when my child has loud, big feelings, I don't know how to react at first, because had I done that as a child, I would have been beaten or told to be quiet or demoralized in some way, that it wasn't as dramatic as I was making it, And so now I'm trying to learn to take myself out of fight or flight when he's having his big feelings, and be with him on a present level and say, okay, it is safe for you to feel. It's not safe for you to throw your iPad against the wall, but you're okay to feel. And I think what I'm trying to illustrate for you here is, what if you took that same perspective for yourself in the way you're parenting your child, and just moved it over to your relationship category, knowing that moving forward, when you choose to have a romantic connection with someone, there may be times where you make a decision that isn't safe for you. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we automatically shut down and don't move forward, whether that means move forward with that person or move forward in introspection and learning how to trust, etc. What if we are able to step outside of ourselves and view ourselves and our actions from a place of compassion and say, man, I thought that this person really was going to dinner by themselves, but it turns out they weren't. But the only indication I had of that was a gut feeling, and I didn't follow it. I know what it feels like now. I know what that scenario looks like now. I know I can alert myself if things aren't right. And next time I will say, hey, did you go to dinner with somebody? And if we can trust ourselves to confront the issue, then we can trust ourselves to move forward addressing the issue.
Whoa.
And to also hold ourselves in compassion as we're moving through all of those barriers, for lack of a better word.
Totally.
You have to be your safe space right now. There isn't another option.
No, there's not.
There isn't. So you've got to create, it's almost like you're becoming two people inside of yourself, you know? It's almost like you're separating. It's kind of like, you know what it is? It's like taking off an old skin. You're in the process of taking off this old skin of the you that was with this person who, did so many, things that affected you that, we've talked about in length, so I won't go back into it. But you're in the beginning of like peeking your head out of the skin, but you keep putting yourself back in it, because that skin's warm and comfy and stuff.
Right.
It's like a snake. You're like shedding. And part of that shedding process means there will be pieces that are left behind that we have to pick away at.
Right.
But it doesn't mean it's not working, right? You're still coming out of that skin. You're still leaving it behind, but there will be a residual that needs attention. But you have to actually slither forward a little bit if you want to get out, We can't just stay still and expect it to fall off and it'll be fine. Not saying that you're not trying, because you've put in a lot of work. But I think maybe we're at a spot in our work where we have to take the leap of faith in actively finding a human being that we can talk to, at least on a friendship level.
Right.
I mean, I'm not saying go crazy, but I'm just saying go a little crazy and make a friend,
Yeah.
Do you trust yourself in friendships, or is it just romantic relationships that you are cautious about?
I would say just romantic. I don't
Okay.
haven't. I've been screwed really bad on a few business deals, and there's some stuff on that end. In friends and business were mixed up for a long time, but that's sort of very, I keep that quite compartmentalized now, I guess. I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but yeah, no, I would say just relationships.
Well, that's a good step, We can feel confident in a friendship. And the connection has to start somewhere.
Totally.
Is there anything we've talked about that you want to go deeper on?
I'm still on the cruise ship, I think. I'm just so blown away by this, and I don't know where it's going. Is this something, this idea of the and maybe this is something I just need to go to sleep on or whatever, but I keep hearing the word Kundalini, actually, in terms of okay, there's this foundational life force, and it being where the two, like sort of the physical and the spiritual meet. And like when both are good, the magic happens. And I'm like, whoa, I don't know. There's something about that that's just like it's a good, because and I'm not sure that this is really healthy or even like energetically hygienic, but I have noticed that like when I'm out grocery shopping or whatever, not just with women, but with males too, I just sort of like ping their field sort of and be like, I almost do this sonar thing where I'm like, is that a safe person? It's like, oh fuck no, man. Like you got to change aisles on that one. Like you don't even want to be anywhere close to that. And so it sort of is helpful in the sense that it's sort of, I have a read on the no. I guess I'm like practicing my intuition all the time, even before I like interact with a person, which sounds kind of like paranoid and weird, but I think it's like part of the learning process maybe, but it's helpful in terms of like, yeah, trust that. Like I almost feel like my energetic or spiritual guidance system is like much more effective than my physical one. Like this physical form is like, as you say, like still like stuck in the snakeskin or whatever. I'm used to dysfunctional bullshit, whereas like the energy sonar is like, hasn't let me down yet, you know. And so
Yeah, so it sounds like you could trust yourself maybe in a spiritual sense.
Yeah, totally. I think I do trust myself more in a spiritual sense than I do in a physical one. Yeah.
Okay, so we are rebuilding trust with ourselves, and we have a portion of that trust that we know that is effective and we can rely on.
Ooh, I like that.
Right?
Yeah, totally.
I mean, isn't that the goal, is to repair the trust? So we're repairing our trust spiritually. We feel confident in that. Okay, I believe that I know that I can tell when a person has good or bad intent or energy in or around my field. Great. I can trust that.
Yeah.
And if we're thinking in terms of duality between human and spiritual, and we're going to interact with someone, and we sit down at the table, we ping our energy, and we get the red alert to run, maybe we only have a drink and then we excuse ourselves.
Right.
But we still have, even if we can't rely on the human side, we can at least rely on the spiritual side, which is more than we were relying on before.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. So we're not going to betray ourselves again from a spiritual sense, because we can trust him that we're not going to do that.
Totally.
And so now, just to bring up shame and guilt, because we've made it through trust and betrayal, and I'd hate to not fulfill all 4 of the COVID. If we're able to trust in ourselves, if we know that moving forward, we will be capable of holding ourselves in a sacred way, meaning we will protect ourselves for the sake of ourselves, it's okay to let go of the times that we didn't. We don't have to say how bad we did, what we did wrong in the way that isn't objective and data mining, right? Data mining is different. Data mining is, okay, I need to figure out what happened, right? So this happened, that wasn't a great pairing. That's a data mine. Shame and guilt is, oh, I'm such a screwed up person. How could I have possibly done that? I can't believe I did that. Why did I keep doing that? That's the shame and guilt voice. We don't need the shame and guilt voice anymore, because we already know we can trust. We've already believe in ourselves that, oh, we're not going to betray ourselves anymore. We can trust ourselves. There's no more resource that can come from shaming and guilting ourselves around those past occurrences. And the only time we really need to go back there after we've healed from it is strictly to data mine, which
Right.
we may have already mined all the data there. We don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's for you to decide, right?
Probably true. And it's interesting because like I've done through psychoanalysis so much work on like shutting the asshole up. Actually the cousin who did the betraying, he always called him that fucking guy. And I always laugh, be like, yeah, that fucking guy, tell him to fuck off. I basically shut that off, except for around like sort of mostly around sex. So it's like, yeah. But being able to trust that, like, is this energetically aligned? You know, if no, get out of there.
Two things I want to touch on. One, your internal critic is the voice of your mother. Have you made that connection yet?
Yeah, I would say it's funny, like in this like in psychoanalysis, yes, but it's funny I haven't generalized it. But yeah, I that makes total sense to me.
And I had a second thing, but I forgot. So I'm gonna let it come back to me. Okay, so I hear a lot of resistance to allowing space for this voice in your head. And I don't think that that's inherently negative. I think that it's whatever works for you is what works for you, right? So I will speak from my perspective about from being raised by a narcissistic mother with a very intense self-criticism. I believe it was in the book, The Untethered Soul. And in that book, they talk about the negative self-narrative voice you have in your head. If you were to imagine that becoming a person, that it had a body and it followed you around throughout the day and it only said the negative thoughts that were in your head, would you want to be around that person? Would you give value to that person's opinion of you? Would you even listen to anything they had to say about life or you or anything in between the two? I don't know about you, but I wouldn't.
I grew up around it. No, but I hear what you're saying. You're like, no, that's not a good.
You today, and if that was a person that was not your parent, because I think parents and family wound us in a way that is hard to detach from. But if that was just the embodiment of some stranger that named Kevin, sorry if any Kevins are listening, that just decided Kevin was going to hang out with you all day and tell you how awful you are, you would be like, Kevin, shut up, I hate you. Like, why are you here? Nobody cares. This is not it, Kevin. No thanks.
100%. Yeah.
But I think, sorry, I was going to say,
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I feel like that's the beginning, right? Like that separation of, okay, this isn't me. This is Kevin. Be quiet, Kevin. That's like that's the compartmentalization. That's not the processing, right? Because those are two different things. That's just Kevin's still there, but we're telling Kevin we're not going to listen, as opposed to allowing Kevin to be there, to allowing Kevin to say what Kevin's going to say, but to know that is not a valuable voice. Not saying, oh, be quiet, I don't want to hear what you have to say, but instead saying, Kevin, I don't believe in your opinion that I'm going to betray myself again. And here is why. Because I know that when I'm spiritually aligned with someone, I can tell. Well, Kevin says it's not real. You can't actually have conscious connection during sex. Well, Kevin, that's not true, because if you align from a human perspective and a spiritual perspective, I know that sexual consciousness can occur.
Woo. Damn. That's awesome. Okay. Yeah, I've not been doing that.
Yeah, so we're gonna fight a little bit with Kevin because Kevin is just not correct about any of it.
Right.
So once we disprove his theories, Kevin will go away. People don't like to be in a room where they're wrong very often.
Oh, no, you ain't got the juice like that, Kevin. Um, me, my friend Kundalini. That's awesome. Okay, I can do that. Hmm. It's like another way of speaking it into being. That's more like interactive.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. That's epic. Hmm.
Do you have any other thoughts or questions or anything of that sort? And then maybe we can allow some time for the container to discuss anything they might be interested in.
That feels pretty complete for me. That's a lot. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much.
No,
Let's
thank you. I love this stuff. Does anyone have anything they want to share or talk about or on or off camera in the chat or not?
Scrolling back here.
Yeah, I guess like it was so interesting to me how like there was this kind of like weaving between, I would say like maybe what people would tend to associate with traditional talk therapy, while also sort of giving space for, like things which people can sometimes consider to be like pretty out there. Um, and like, like I would say that like I'm aware of my own bias against like traditional talk therapy modalities. Um, but it was sort of like fitting for me that it kind of like the conversation wound its way back to like, I don't know, like whether you want to call it like pure intuition or like spiritual connection or like energetic guidance. And yeah, I guess like I feel like I'm really grateful that this is there for, I would say like circumstances or like, yeah, like energetic context such as this, right? Where it's like, like you're saying, it's like you can do the data mining thing, but the data is going to like trend towards like confirming some of these like I want to say like ancestral ideas which have been sort of like imprinted around like the necessity or like the primacy even of hard work. Um and I want to say also like at least like within my framework, like some of these like karmic mounds which have been sort of created, which sort of like attract the same kind of circumstances. And yeah, I feel like being able to like lean on something which almost like shortcuts all of that feels like it's a tremendous blessing. And also perhaps like maybe something that I want to like tentatively say has only arisen because of like all of these other circumstances, either the circumstances you've been born into or the circumstances which you've encountered in your life. I'm curious, like, if that means anything to you.
I'm just like, I feel like there's this, I'm just reading this comment you had, like, it's interesting we can know conceptual layers, like I'm worthy of compassion, but it always doesn't like trickle down. And like, and then you said in some moments we act as if we forgot it in our conceptual layers of mind. And like what the relationship is there with these like karmic mounds, and then this like just sort of saying fuck it to all of that and being like, I'm just going to use my sonar and like navigate. And like you also said, like, oh, maybe there's a way of like bypassing all of this. And it's like the only, because I mean, part of like the way my mind works and stuff, I get tangled in conceptual knots. And so I like almost have to return to the sonar, the like spiritual guidance system, in order to even like navigate enough that I can start to untangle things. I don't know if that makes any sense or like is an adequate response to your question.
I mean, it makes a lot of sense to me, and also it's like you know, I used to listen to Tim Ferriss a lot, and he used to say how like he used to talk about this in the context of psychedelics, right? Opportunity to make like new tracks down the.
Oh, I think you're muted.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't know what the last thing you heard me saying was, but the connection has been pretty. It's been pretty interesting to me how like we've all been experiencing slight connection issues. Yeah, I guess I was saying it's like um going back to what you were saying about sort of like shortcutting around like all of these like mountains, let's say like karmic mounds or like thought concept mounds. Yeah, I feel like it's almost like we need we it's like if it doesn't like snow on the mountain, we tend to like go down the same tracks, right? And like those tracks tend to get like hardened. Um and sometimes like whether it's like through like the energetic inputs of like, you know, what sometimes we call like kundalini, or you know, like cultivating ki or chi, or you know, even like doing like psychedelics and getting like a new kind of round of snow so that we can like make new tracks or like make new thought forms. um yeah, I feel like even like some of these like conceptual exercises, like, you know, trying to show up as your own mother, where it's like, okay, like how do we know what like that mother is supposed to look like, right? Or it's like, you know, what does a like what kind of relationship should I be headed for, or like setting that intention in words or thoughts or whatever is going to be coming from within a pre-established lens, which has already led us to these sorts of outcomes, right? And I feel like that's where, you know, like spirituality or faith, not to get like super like to get like the opposite in some ways of like evangelistic or proselytizing, right? It's like there has to be something like which gives us the ability to like have new experiences and create new expectations, you could say, in my experience.
And I think, I don't know, Annie's still with us?
I'm here. I'm just being still.
Okay. Yeah, that just triggered something in me because it was interesting in terms of like the mothering exercise. And I almost feel like this was like a direct transmission from somewhere. It was like, I got a felt sense of it first, and I'm still not sure that I know conceptually what that is. But it was like, you would have, by grace, sort of these moments of like, oh, like I'm okay. And I'm okay at a really like, no matter what, like, you're not alone. Even when you're like physically alone, you are not alone. And just having this like feeling of like being held, really, but like energetically. And like that's sort of my compass. And I guess I'm not, I need to trust in that. And like
Yeah,
in some sense that will lead to the sorry, I'm talking too much.
yeah,
The will lead, it'll like take you to the conceptual safe place. It'll take you to the like, oh, this is what it looks like in physical reality. So you can actually, it's like you gotta have faith in that experience in the body.
It's such an sorry. It's such an interesting situation because I feel you're more of like a conceptualist and I'm more of an intuition feely person, and I'm not so brainy in that I will feel everything first. So when I'm like trying to envision something, for example, like you said with the mother's love, the first thing that's going to happen to me is I feel it energetically and sometimes emotionally, sometimes physically. Like I will feel all of that first before I try to put a label on it. And sometimes I won't label it at all. And I just go based off of a feeling and not so much the to-do list of what does that look like in words, and more of how does this feel in life.
mhm, yeah.
Yeah, learning how to trust that.
My experience, like with like my sense of the energy that you're gesturing at here is that like, yeah, like you will not be able to not have faith in it at some point if if I'm like kind of feeling into the same thing that you're feeling. And it's I feel like it is like a tremendous gift, and it can be like really uncomfortable, especially when you could say like being able to like come up with to-do lists which are like based on like linear or more sophisticated interpolation of like the data that we've experienced has gotten us like so far in some ways in our lives. But yeah, like my experience, I'll say like what I call like Sekhmet, or like some people call like Kundalini, is that like it's sort of like gradually kind of works through um like the predefined programming, which tends to like put us into the same situations, not to like jump off of a cliff, but to like scaffold gradually towards like less scaffolded ways of navigating, to the point where it's like stepping off of a cliff onto a wave, let's say, doesn't really feel like it's a leap of faith at all, but more just sort of like, oh, like that looks fun.
Right, right. That's cool.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I guess like before we close up the container, I'm curious if like anybody else has anything to say, or like Hugh or Annie. It's been massive for me in terms of touching into things which I feel like we're ready to release.
Yeah, I feel like I've released a lot of doubt about myself, basically. Like so much of that lack of trust is just doubt about the nature of reality. Because it's almost like, yeah, it's intuition fighting with the data mind. Or like I have these functions that like interpret the data mind. And my intuition's like, nah, that's bullshit. Like, you have these experiences, and like, just stop doubting them. That's it.
Yeah. Well, Anna, do you have anything else to say before we close it up?
I just want to say thank you for being here, for participating, to everyone, especially Hugh, to Nobu for creating the space, and yeah, for letting me be a part of it. It's been very special for me.
Totally. I'm super grateful to like both of you for what you shared, and Annie, like for the way that you sort of like guided the conversation so that we could kind of touch into that material. Super grateful for everybody holding this space as well. And yeah, I'll talk with y'all in the 000 space about what to do with the recording. But I feel like there's a ton to unpack in the chat as well. Like in the thread for this, and I really look forward to, because I think there's a lot that y'all already touched on, which is like super juicy, but I also feel like there's more to come as we start to like, I gotta say, like, gain familiarity with the energies which will come into the space of what was like released. So thanks again, and we'll see y'all on Discord, I guess. Peace.